Okay. And we're coming on live again. And okay. We're back up. And I can't see how many people are on now. All of a sudden, I don't know what's happening. Slow mode is on. Yeah, this has just really been a terrible start, but we're okay now. Okay, so this is what I suggest. Oh, here we go. Yeah, that's better. Okay, so I'm gonna actually act like we're not even on a live stream. And I think we're just gonna dive right into it. Okay? Okay. So we're gonna run this like it's a regular video. All right, so I'll kick us off and we'll go from there. And I'm starting, hang on. I'm so sorry, you guys, I'm getting all that noise again. Yep, and it's Allie. I just hit mute and it all goes away. And now it's gone. Right now it's perfect. Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm really tempted to just turn the stream off and let's just record this. I'm gonna edit it and just put it on the channel. What do you guys think? Okay, we'll just keep it going then. It's not that I'm nervous about. It's not that I'm nervous. It's not that I'm nervous about the mistakes. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to kick it off just like we're doing old school videos. Okay. Nobody's on right now, so I'm just kind of pausing, looking at my notes. Man, everything looks nice. Okay, cool. All right, so this is going to be just for the big video anyway, because I'm going to hack this thing up and put it on a couple different platforms. Okay. So let me see how I'm going to start this. All right. So welcome to the channel, everyone. Welcome back. If you're an old subscriber, thanks for joining us. If you're brand new, thanks for checking us out. So the old premise of the channel is not what we're doing, but we're trying to stay in line with what makes sense moving forward. So we stepped away from the channel for quite a few years, and there's been a lot going on. That's a podcast for a whole nother day as to what's happened the past few years. So that's definitely for another time. But for now, it's kind of like, I had this idea that I wanted to do a podcast. And part of that podcast idea really came from the idea of, I used to really enjoy, first of all, doing videos with the kids. And I shouldn't call them kids anymore because Annie's in college and Harrison's already graduated college. But to me, they're kids. They're my kids, at least. So with that, there's been a lot of the channel, the original channel really brought a lot of conversations to us. Like, we would listen to music, we would talk about music, and in talking about music, it would bring up a lot of other subjects because there's a whole lot of information with regards to why these songs were written and this and that. And then we would be talking about music, and that would evolve into movies. And then we would talk about movies. And then all of a sudden we started to get really creative and realized at one point Annie had never even seen The Matrix. So me and Annie sat down once and we watched The Matrix, and that started bringing up all sorts of interesting conversations about, are we living in a simulation? And then we started really deep diving down a lot of different conspiracy theories. And it really brought on a lot of intriguing conversations over the years. And part of that really stemmed from just pure curiosity. I think, I'm one of those people that just has to sit around and be like, why are we here? It's like, what's going on? It's like, none of this makes any sense. So with that being said, I started to have some ideas about, pop culture for starters. And part of pop culture is I'm Gen X, and I grew up as a child in the 80s. And when I mean child in the 80s, I was old enough in 1980 to remember all of the 1980s. So to me, I recognized a definitive decade of a massive culture shift in performers and movies and singers and whatever that really defined the generation. So anyway, and then all of a sudden, in the 90s, and this is I'm just talking about the time period that I kind of lived through. Yes, I remember the big chunk of the 70s too, and I'll get into that in a few minutes though. But like the 90s, grunge came in and changed everything with music, and it was just definitive changes. And then all of a sudden I get to the year 2000, and fast forward to, you guys hear this cat, right? Guys, hang on. We're still good. We're still good on this. I've got to shut this door. I can't deal with this. God, this is lunacy, guys. This is the worst start ever. I'm actually glad that nobody's joined right now. The other day I started one of these and I had like 15 people join in like 5 minutes, and then I had like 100 views over like 20 minutes. So I'm like, oh my God, guys. I don't have it listed. That's why nobody's joining. It means I haven't made it public yet. I am such a moron. Hang on. Okay. So this is actually good because I felt like I was rambling, and I'm going to go make us public, and then we're going to crank it up, and I'm going to start over. Okay. And I'm going to, yeah. So this is going to be better. And I'm just going to go right into it this time. I'm not even going to do an intro, big intro, anything. We're just going to go right into it. So public, done, save, and we are public now. So we'll see if anybody starts joining here in a minute. But I'm recording on my end. Okay, hang on before people start joining. Okay, so here we go. We're gonna crank it off before people start joining, so when they join, we're in mid-conversation, all right? So I'm gonna start it from the beginning. I'm gonna make it a lot faster this time. All right, everybody, welcome back to the channel. When I say welcome back, I mean like welcome back from years ago. It's probably been about 4 years since we've been on here. Hopefully you guys will see some familiar faces if you're joining in. Annie disappeared from the channel long before I did. We used to do a lot of videos together, and then high school got very busy, and she kind of disappeared. I tried to manage it myself. But I knew who the real star power of the channel was. And it just got to a point where I got real busy too. Life gets in the way, and we just kind of walked away for a bit. But we've been talking lately, and we had ideas, and we're like, well, do we want to go back and do videos again, or do we want to try something new, or do we do both? So, that's just kind of where we're at right now. So the idea came about to do a podcast, and not just one. This isn't just a one-off. We're going to have a lot of different subjects. I'm trying to make them as intriguing as I can. And so this is kind of our first one ever. So we're just going to kind of see how it goes. This all kind of evolved because of the channel and a lot of the subjects that we used to talk about. It started with music, and then it evolved into movies, and then it evolved into us watching the movies together. And one of the ones that really started it out was The Matrix, because that started bringing up a lot of conspiracy theories. We started talking about a lot of different things that were just kind of anomalies of the universe. It's kind of like, and before I even get into the subject, this is something that if you don't know, it's very surprising. I went out to ChatGPT and I straight up asked AI, answer in a yes or no answer without an explanation. Do you think, with everything you know, are we in a simulation? What do you think the answer was from AI? That's exactly right. So I went out and actually asked AI, just based on everything, do you believe we're in a simulation? And the answer was yes. It just came back yes. And that's just kind of terrifying. Now that's kind of a piece of what we're talking about today. But I'm not going to get into that yet. But I kind of wanted to preface what we're going to be talking about with that. So today, what I really want to talk about, and this actually came up kind of just me sitting around thinking. And this is kind of how my brain works, because I'm wildly into pop culture. I'm wildly into music. Anybody who knows the channel is wildly aware of that, for starters. And I started to notice patterns. And I started talking to my wife about this, Annie's mom. And I was like, have you ever noticed that every decade, let's just go back to where pop culture really started to evolve with movies and music. Let's just start in the 1920s. Like the 1920s, and I'm going to go through each of these kind of individually and talk about them. But if you look at the 1920s, it is just definitively different than the 1930s. And the 1930s is wildly different than the 1940s. And the same with the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, all the way through the 90s. Every single decade is so defined by its culture and its music. And then all of a sudden, we just hit this spot in the early 2000s, and very little has changed over like 20-something years. And hear me out on this, because I know a lot of people are going to probably be like, no, that's not true, that's not true. But I'm going to get to my point. And the point is like, let's take the movie Dazed and Confused, okay? Dazed and Confused was made in 1993, and it was based on a time period from 1976. In 1993, you're watching a movie about the 70s, wildly different decade. It's so easy to tell that you are watching a movie about the 70s, but you're in the 90s. If that movie was made today, it would only be 2007. You wouldn't even notice a difference. And here, I've even got a better one for you. Dirty Dancing, okay? Movie made in the 80s. If you went and made that movie today, okay, well, let me back up. Dirty Dancing goes back to like 1950 something, okay? Definitively 1950s in the movie, and you know it's the 1950s, and you're watching it in the 80s. However, if you made that movie today, it'd be like 2001. There's really no significant difference. Like if you made a movie about 2001 right now, you would probably have to question, well, what year was this made? Or what year is this supposed to be? So you following me here? Like, I feel like we're in this weird loop of pop culture nothingness. Like, nothing new is being created. And here's the thing. And again, a lot of people are going to probably Disagree with me at first, but hang on, because I got a lot of things to talk about. And by the end of this, I actually am hoping that I can change your mind on this. So let's break it down a little bit. And I'm going to give everybody a chance to talk. I know I'm monopolizing the conversation right now, but I've got to get this out so we can get to our talking points. And really it's like, so have we stalled? Let's just talk about the 20s. Let's start in the 20s, okay? So some of these people you might have heard of, some of you might not have. You know, it's like, let's talk about the vibe first. You know, it's post-war. World War I ended a couple years earlier. There was a massive economic boom, as that typically happens after a war. You have the 20s was just defined by the Roaring 20s. They have a name for it. Flapper dresses. Everybody dressed up nicely. You know, if you've seen The Great Gatsby, it was kind of a cultural thing. The jazz exploded. Hang on, I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Give me 1 second. And there we go. And I've figured out how to combat this feedback. So just give me 1 second there if that happens. So let's go back to the 20s. So jazz exploded. You have like Louis Armstrong. Have you guys heard of him? Famous jazz singer. He's got the huge cheeks when he blows, everything like that. So, I mean, it's a defining sound of the 1920s. If you go out to a jazz club today and they're playing that, it takes you to that decade. You know, you had, culturally speaking, you had speakeasies. You know, you had Prohibition. And I already mentioned, you know, it's really kind of the Gatsby era, the glamour. You know, and here's one. You know, women were gaining a tremendous amount of visibility back then. You know, all of these things define that decade. It is the 1920s, and if you see a movie today that's based in the 20s, you recognize immediately that's the 1920s. Okay? Now let's go to the 30s real quick. The Great Depression. Everything gets bland and blah. People are struggling. It's wildly more of a conservative time period. Clothes are way more muted. You know, as I kind of mentioned, blues and folk music really became more of the popular. You had people like Woody Guthrie. Now, however, on the other side of that, you did have swing music. Swing music started to emerge. The fact that it was the Depression, a lot of movies were being made about like escapism. And you had a big rise in stars like Shirley Temple and Clark Gable, you know, stars like that, you know, very recognizable names. And when you see those movies, Clark Gable and the quotes, you know, of those movies, it's like or if you see a movie about the 1930s, it's unquestionably the 1930s. And then you go into the 40s, and let's just keep going for a minute. And I don't want to be too redundant on this, but I feel like I need to break this down so everybody can see how crystal clear what I'm talking about with these decades. Like the 1940s, we have another war, World War II, okay? And then what are we doing now? We're rebuilding. So the vibe is a global war. You know, and when wars are over, everything's followed by hope and it's followed by growth. Fashion became very military inspired. Think about some of the videos that mimic the war, and what's her name? Christina Aguilera has that one song. I can't remember what it's called, and it's based on like 40s fashion. You guys know what I'm talking about? Maybe not, maybe. Anyway, it's again, 1940s movies are crystal clear. You're in the 1940s. A lot of propaganda films. The attitude was all about you know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Duty and optimism for growth. And it's crystal clear. Now, for the 50s, this is where it becomes really defined. Rock and roll music starts. Okay? You get out of the big bands. The big band era is coming to an end. Elvis Presley's coming on the scene, and it changes everything. The sock hop dances, I think that's what they're called. I'm not that old. So you've got a lot of prosperity, People are moving out of the cities. The suburbs are exploding. You got poodle skirts. You got leather jackets. It's kind of the start of the motorcycle gang look and things like that. You got the greasers and things like that. So again, if you see a movie about the 1950s, it's unquestionable the 1950s. And then you get into the 60s. I'm gonna go a little bit faster so we can kind of get into more conversation. But you get into the 60s. You got civil rights. You got anti-war protest. You've got the space race. And then all of a sudden you've got kind of like the music scene changes dramatically from rock and roll. So defining music, defined the whole decade. The Beatles. I mean, come on. You got the Beatles. You've got Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin. You know, the messages are music driven. The politics are music driven. You know, it's like the people against the government back then. It's such a defined decade. And then you get into the 70s. And a lot of people are going to disagree on this. I mean, you've got really bad clothes. I was part of the 70s. My school pictures are hilarious. You got lots of polyester. Polyester was invented. Rock becomes heavier. But here's the thing. So let me talk about some of these bands in the 70s. You have generational defining bands in every one of these decades. If you go back to the 50s, you've got Elvis. If you go to the 60s, you've got the Beatles. If you go to the 70s, you've got bands, bless you, you've got bands like Led Zeppelin. You've got the Eagles. And then, hear me out on this too, a lot of people are going to be like, what? I'm sorry. Disco was a defining moment in the 70s. It was massive. And even if you didn't like it, you couldn't escape it. And that's my point. If you look at anything from the 70s, it's crystal clear it's from the 70s. And the exact same thing with the 80s. So we're talking about me now. Gen X. I was 7 years old in 1980, and I started high school in 1987. And I lived and breathed the 80s. I'm a true Gen Xer. And the 80s, probably very nostalgic for me, but it's one of the funnest decades ever. You know, you have technology really started to explode in the 1980s. We can start there because we're going to circle back on the technology side because that's where things really start to get interesting. Because there's a lot more to this than just like why we're in some weird cultural loop or cultural stall out in the 2000s. Neon, think about the 70s clothes. You had these big bell bottoms, polyester, and then you get into the 80s and everything is neon and you got these huge shoulder pads and hair is massive hair. If you're on TikTok and you see some of those 80s nostalgic things, Gen X, hair's up to here. It's so defined. Now let's talk about the music. Cultural, just everything about it, like even if you didn't like her, Madonna, just cultural phenomenon. You could not escape her in the 1980s. Michael Jackson, okay? Two just massive pop icons. They defined the whole decade, an entire generation. And let's take the other side of it. If you didn't like pop, Bon Jovi, hair bands started. No matter how you look at it, it is just definitively the 1980s. If you turn on a TV show and they do a flashback to the 80s, they don't even have to say they're in the 80s. It's the 1980s. You know it's the 1980s without question. You know, and the rise of the video games, home computing. Computers finally made it home. It was very much a mall culture. I used to go to the mall for 5 hours. You just walk around in freaking circles, talk to your friends nonstop. Go to the roller skating rink. I mean, I grew up on roller skating. It was a great time. Everything was super flashy, super loud. I mean, hell, go back and watch Miami Vice reruns. You would never have to ask, what decade was this made in? Because you know it was the 1980s. Let's go to the 1990s. Grunge evolves. Everybody starts wearing flannel. The music gets much more lower tone. Everything in the 80s was synth pop. You know, it was the MTV era. And now all of a sudden we're moving into grunge and the poppy stuff is going away. And a lot of bands of the 80s are like, Pearl Jam and Nirvana just destroyed my career. But let's talk about them real quick. Pearl Jam and Nirvana. Nirvana defined an entire generation of the 1990s. Grunge music changed music wildly out of the 80s. It was a massive shift in pop culture. The internet began, alternative lifestyles were coming out, the attitude was whatever, anti-mainstream things. If you go to TikTok today, people talk about Gen X. It's like people are like scared of Gen X. They're like, because we don't give a shit. We don't care. Like we were latchkey kids, and the 90s was when we were becoming adults, and it's just a very defined decade. And then now let's go into 2000s. And I wish I had some sound effects because I just want to go, wah, wah, wah. Because everything is in a nostalgic loop now. Think about the past 20 years. 80s fashion circled back around. It's almost like we're remixing old stuff. Synthesizer music really started coming back. And here's the thing though. You've got a lot, like the 80s, we had grunge, decade-defining sound. 80s, we had pop music and the birth of hair bands. 70s, we had disco and we had hard rock with Led Zeppelin. 60s, we had the Beatles and then we had Hendrix, and I'm just running through these real good. In the 50s, we had the Elvis breakout. Now, pop culture music in the 2000s, it's everything. It's pop, it's rap, it's EDM. And here's the thing, there's no defining genre. There's not one, like the 80s, you had Madonna and you had Michael Jackson, massive icons. In the 2000s, a lot of people are probably going to argue this point, but you could say there's like a lot of uniqueness out there. Billie Eilish. I mean, she's very unique in a sense. But here's the thing though. I mean, there's massive popularity with certain rappers and all sorts of stuff. So I'm not taking away that the culture doesn't exist. So let's clear that up right now. This isn't about the fact that we're not seeing creative things in a sense of it's, no good. I mean, I think there's brilliant music and there's great movies and stuff, but every single thing I see is just kind of regurgitated to me. There's nothing that's defining. Like think about the movies. How many movies have been remade? They're just remaking everything over and over again. Like superhero movies. That's all you see that's new anymore. It's like, what are we doing here, guys? By the way, I'm going to take a real quick pause. If you guys are making comments, it's real hard to monitor the chat right now, but I'm going to try to get to some of the comments here in a little bit. I mean, superhero movies are just wildly all over the place. It's like that's all you see. And they're going to be remaking all these other movies or remaking movies from the 80s. Fashion keeps recycling from past decades. And now we're like in this high-tech time period and everybo's anxious and everybody's uptight and we're wildly misinformed. Like nobody knows what's going on anymore. Do you know that there's statements out there that's been verified that like the government and NASA 100% believe that there's absolute life outside of Earth, but nobody cares because nobody can prove it, or it's an overflow of information. It's so much information that we can't make heads or tails of what anything is anymore. There's really, and along with that goes, there's really no cultural fingerprint for the last 20 years. And that's what I'm trying to get at. Everything has been regurgitated. There's nothing that defines the 2010s. There's nothing that defines the 2020s, like Madonna and Michael Jackson define the 80s, and grunge and Pearl Jam and Nirvana define the 90s, and so forth. The things I've already said. Nothing is significant enough to be a massive cultural change, a defining moment in the decade that we all are like. If you watch a movie from this time period, you're not even going to know what year it is. It's kind of like what I said earlier. If you made Dazed and Confused today, it would be like 2007. You wouldn't even be able to tell the difference. Think about all the cultural difference from that movie it was made in 93 and you're watching it based on 1976, I believe is what it is. And it's wildly cultural different than what we were living in the 90s when that movie came out. And if you did that today and made a movie about 2007, you wouldn't even be able to notice the difference. So that is a lot. And I haven't even got into the interesting stuff yet. But first of all, I need to find out if Annie and Allie here, like, first of all, if you're following me, and secondly, like, this is a lot of information. What do you guys think about that? Like, am I making sense? Or do you, and if your opinion varies wildly and you disagree with me, prove me wrong. And if you agree with me, let's hear it. So, Annie, go for it. We'll get to Allie. Say, by the way, this is Allie, my niece. And of course, if you're new to the channel, Annie used to be the superstar of the channel. And I'm just me. I'm nobody. So Annie, why don't you go first? You're the first one on my screen, so. Are you calling me old? Oh, hey, Annie, refresh your camera. Somebody just said they can't hear you. Because I can hear you. And I'm going to challenge you when you're done with this. I'm going to give you a heads up. I'm going to challenge you on what you're saying when you're done with this. But go ahead. This is very intriguing. And I'm learning from you too. Annie, people are saying they can't hear you. Annie, people are saying they can't hear you for some reason. Nobody seems to be able to hear you, Annie. Because I hear you crystal clear. Turn your mic off and turn it back on or something. Because I hear you just fine. Oh, this is not good. Okay, well, keep going because this is still recording and we can still put this video out and everybody can go back and listen to it with full volume. So just go ahead and keep. I don't want to derail us. So hang on, but let me catch everybody up real quick if they can't hear you. So essentially, Annie's talking about people like low-rise jeans in the 2000s were a massive trend, and Drake was defining music. Who else did you mention? I'm sorry, Allie, what'd you say? Oh yeah, Eminem. So defining stuff like that. So since people can't hear you, let me just jump back in and kind of not go against what you're saying, because there's a lot that I agree with. But it's still not my point. And what I mean by that is, in the nicest, sweetest way, like, I'm going to reference a lot of the past decades here. A culturally, or I should say, a generationally defining, like, artist. Like, do you really, like Madonna changed the face of the 80s. She became a sensation overnight. And with that, fashion changed tremendously. Nobody can hear either one of you guys. I don't know what in the world's going on. Oh, hang on.
Hello.
Hang on. Can you guys hear them now? I think I fixed the problem.
Hello.
Can you guys hear them now? Give me a hang on. Give me a yes. I'm just waiting for a yes because I think I fixed the problem.
I keep freezing up, don't I?
Yeah, you keep freezing. But I am the smartest man alive. I fixed the volume, so now everybody can hear. But let me just reiterate real quick for those of you who couldn't hear her originally. Annie was talking about some artists like Drake and Eminem, low-rise jeans from a fashion statement, that there are defining moments. And Annie's going to look at this, and Allie's going to look at this wildly different than I am, because, culturally speaking, I'm in my own loop of previous decades. As I get older, I the new stuff. But at the same time, I was really kind of feel like I was up at the times because we were doing the channel, and Annie was introducing music to me, I was introducing music to her. But the reason that I'm kind of contradicting or saying, not saying what she's saying is wrong, but I'm saying my point is a little different in the sense that, and I like to use this example. Madonna, when she came on the scene, she literally changed the 80s overnight. She performed in the 1984 MTV Music Movie Awards, and she came out in that famous wedding dress scene and did Like a Virgin. And the next day, she was a phenomenon. I don't like to use the word every, but for the point of this podcast, every girl started idolizing her and dressing like her in droves. Michael Jackson, Thriller, like those to me are generationally defining moments in pop culture. They defined the 80s. I love Eminem. I like Drake. Love Eminem. And I still don't think he's a generationally defining artist of that time period.
Can I ask why not?
Because, and here's why not. Allie, I'm going to get to you in 1 second. And here's why not. Here's why not. Because when you think of the 2000s, you probably think of 20 people. You don't think of 3 or 4 like you do in every other decade. In the 90s, you think of Pearl Jam and Nirvana. In the 80s, you think of I look like Bill and Ted. Excellent one another. In the 80s, you think of Madonna, you think of Michael Jackson, you think of hair bands, Bon Jovi, the 70s, Led Zeppelin, the Eagles, Janis, not Janis Joplin, that's the 60s. And then you think of disco, the Bee Gees, things like that. Those are monumentally, generationally defining pop culture. And you think of the 2020s, you could probably name 20 people, and they all wash over each other. None of them alone define generation. That's my point.
Well, I think part of that might be because like the structure of popular culture has changed because of the internet. So now you have all kinds of people that can, it's not as much about, people getting in with the biggest record labels and then their stuff being pushed out there. We don't have MTV. Well, yeah, we don't. We do, but it's different.
Oh, it's wildly different. Yeah.
Right. And now, a lot of times, the way that things are promoted is by people themselves on the internet. So
it's not as condensed. Like, we have a much more widespread access with this new technology that allows us to have so many different things being pushed into our faces all the time.
Are like, okay, I want to see this, or I want to see that, or I like this, or I like that.
Yeah, you can find anything. I mean, even just think of the rise of ChatGPT. You can search one thing and it'll give you the wide, like, it is searching everything on the internet, everything that has ever been known, every piece of history, every piece of, culture now, every piece of anything that's going on with everyone that's huge in the world. Every celebrity, you have all of their information at the tip of your hands. You see so much more. So I think there is a bigger range of what's being presented and what's being popularized in these decades is just because we have more access. But there are still defining people. I mean, I think that there are people who are going to be completely culturally significant. If you look back at, looking in the 2020s right now, you look back at 2000s, and I think that you can see specific people that were like, oh, they were big then. We know them. Britney Spears, huge culture. That's sort of like Madonna, she.
Britney Spears.
A lot too, because the range is so wide and we still have people like that.
Yeah.
So,
okay, Britney Spears started in the 90s, for starters. But my point is, you guys are kind of almost proving my point for me. And here's why. You kind of actually proved my point with what you said. And I get what you're saying in a sense that you have these monumentally huge stars and they're wildly popular. But did they actually alter an entire generation? And the reason that I'm going to say no is because it's oversaturated. Like, Nirvana and Pearl Jam defined an entire decade. And I say those two, and everybody that went through it remember is the 90s. If I say Madonna and Michael Jackson and Bon Jovi, the rise of hair bands, you automatically think of the 80s. If you say Britney Spears, you guys are thinking the 2000s. She started in the late 90s. And the thing is, rappers, brilliant. And I'm not taking away from the pop culture. I'm not saying it's crap. I'm just saying there's not a defining moment. There's not a defining performer that shaped the 2000s into something culturally significant that in 50 years from now, you're going to look back and be like, oh, that's without a doubt the 2000s, the early 2000, 2010, or that's without a doubt 2010 to 2020. That's what I'm driving at. So keep going though. I mean, you guys are on the right track, but I'm still waiting for that one moment, that one person where I'm like, oh crap, I'm wrong, but I haven't heard it yet.
Well, I would say you're talking a lot about like music and stuff, but there's been, I mean, there's like things like Instagram, like people that got on there and knew how to utilize it, that did those things themselves, like Kylie Jenner. Whenever she got on Instagram, she was huge. I would definitely argue that she was defining, especially for girls' fashion. Oh, yeah. I mean, the Kardashians, they really took things over, but they kind of did it themselves, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was our culture to do now.
Yeah.
They figured it out and kind of took over in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, they become the complete defining, you know, thing to look at. Everyone was doing what they were doing. They become these cultural figures for us in the culture at that year. Like the trends, that is where it came from, was those specific, you know, people like the Kardashians, or, you know, even people, if you want to continue on the music industry, even people like Lady Gaga completely changed everything for the LGBT community, for the, you know, for just women and how they present themselves and how they, you know, it's completely changed, you know, because there's such a widespread of things. Like these people changed
Beyonce.
Yeah, Beyonce. Jeez, no one can stop talking about Beyonce.
Yeah.
It is, and you know what? In the 20, you know, 50s, people are still gonna be talking about Beyonce. Like that's kind of how I think it is looking back on the other, you know, years and things like that. You see these things as so defining, but you only know that because we're in the future. We're looking at it from so far away. You know, when we look at it in 2050, I bet there will be a few select people that stick, and those will be the defining moments. You think of that, and that's what you think of 2010s, or that's what you think of 2020 was when TikTok completely blew up. That is a cultural defining moment for our, you know, generation.
So let me jump in real quick. And I can't talk over you guys because I have to mute my desktop audio or I echoed everybody. So that's why I'm being so quiet in the background. Annie, you're frozen again. So you talked about like Kylie Jenner. Let's talk about that for a second. So are we saying that the 2000s are defined by the reality star versus a real performer? Yes, you have Beyonce. Yes, you have Lady Gaga, and wonderful. I love Lady Gaga. You know, and again, I need to make it clear to the audience that I'm not bashing 2000s pop culture at all. I love it. There's tons of things I love, tons of movies I love, tons of music I love. But what I'm saying is, I still don't believe there's a defining cultural shift. I haven't seen the shift like you saw from the 20s to the 30s and so forth. That shift doesn't exist. And what I mean by that is all of the Okay.
And also, I might argue shifts happen, but because of the structure of I mean, this is our society now with the internet and everything. Those shifts happen faster.
So
There's very shifts
These
within each of
define
these
eras, but
2000.
our
Yeah,
eras are like, yeah, they're like this.
yeah, they're big waves with the internet. Like,
Mhm.
okay, when I talk, by the way, guys, I have to mute you guys or I echo. So kind of just raise your hand and I'll unmute you, because if I don't unmute you, I'm echoing. So let me talk about what you guys just talked about though. So you want me to explain what I mean by a shift? The 1920s, wildly defined by. Hang on, I'm gonna go over here. I made some piece, people so I could talk about with this. The 20s, wildly defined by how everyone dresses, and music was cohesive through the whole decade. The whole decade was flapper dresses, it's speakeasies in the Prohibition era, jazz explosion, the Great Gatsby, the glamour. Just the whole decade defined by that. The 30s, the Great Depression. Let's just skip the 30s, but let's go to the 50s, because the 50s is where things really start to become more interesting. An entire decade is defined by rock and roll, okay? Defined by the rock and roll. Elvis is coming out and people are losing their mind over this, and you have a massive rebellion. Kids are all about rock and roll, and their parents are just like total anti all of that. They think it's the end of the world. The whole decade is based on that. The 60s, the whole decade, the Beatles, just monumentally huge, define that decade. Then you go into the 70s, and let's talk about 70s music real quick. Again, and I'll mention them again. You've got the Eagles, you've got Led Zeppelin, the birth of hard rock. Then on the other side of it, you've got the birth of disco, and the birth and the death of disco was very short-lived, but it's still a monumentally defining part of that decade. The clothes were just, you could, if you see somebody dressed from the 70s, if you go to a Halloween party or costume party and you see somebody dressed from the 70s, you're gonna know they are from the 70s. And the same thing with the 80s, the big hair, the colors, the music was changed dramatically into the synth pop. The whole decade looked like that. Then you get into the 90s, grunge. Towards the latter half, you had more rock and roll was speeding up, but grunge really defined. When you think about the 90s music, you think about that. You think about flannels. You think about the way they were dressed. The whole decade. Now, I'm going to unmute you guys in like 2 seconds. You get to the 2000s, it's just all meshed together. There's nothing that is solidly defining the last 20-something years. There's nothing that stands out that is recognizable to be solely in that decade or both decades. So that's what I mean by culturally defining changes in culture. You're unmuted.
I think we do have that. I think that it might just be harder for you to see it being in a different age during that time. Obviously, everyone can look back in any time in the history and see those cultural differences, specifically each 10 years or whatever decade. But we're just getting into the 2000s. When we're in 3000s, if we make it that far, guys, we'll look back at 2010s, or 2000s. These cultural significant things were what you think of. That's it. Like denim skirts for fashion, that was huge. Paris Hilton being Britney Spears was 90s, sorry.
She 100% could be considered part of the 2000s as well. Just Britney Spears, we can lump her into the 2000s, but I hear you on that.
And this is the rise of the digital dawn. You have the gaming systems, PlayStation, Xbox, this is all becoming significantly changing for the new world, or what's going to be completely different in 3000s, and then 2010s. If you want the vibe, this is the rise of social media, the complete rise of it. You start seeing everyone's lives on show. That creates a complete new culture of popular stuff, trends. Me Too movements. You have all these things that people are coming on and saying and doing, and you have fashion it's going to be like Off-White. There's going to be brands that completely come into play. This is when even the huge brands like Gucci and that comes to huge, like everyone wants Gucci, and you have artists, Lady Gaga, 2010s, that's when Drake is, you have, all these people that you're going to look back on in 30, 50 years and think that there were few defining moments. You can't see it when you're this close to the time. I bet you when you're in the 20s, or say you're in the 50s, and you're thinking like, the 20s were so different, but everything is still the same. Like it's almost like this is just a different variation of that. Well, that's life. Everything's gonna be a different variation of what we already know. That's just moving on. And then you have the 2010s. That gets you to complete different age. That's post-pandemic, not post-war. It's so different. It's post-pandemic. This is a complete change in the digital, just everything, the digital life. You have all everything is online now. That's completely changed social interaction. It's completely changed the culture of, being close to one another and whatever it may be. You have defined fashion of people wanting to look back already. People are trying to bring back even 2010s clothes right now. Right now in 2025, people are starting to wear low-rise jeans again. They want to look back because we're in such this new structural change of like after the pandemic that everything has been built on looking in the past because the entire time during the pandemic, no one could do anything. There wasn't any chance for movement other than being on the internet and looking at all this history that we have and everyone creating this new trends that have everything to do with the past. So it's hard to say that, there's nothing to define right now if we're in the right now. You won't know that right now.
Okay, I'm laughing. Allie, jump in too. But I'm laughing because I'm going to come back to all of that in a second. But Allie, definitely go for it.
Okay. So things with the internet have changed so much since the 2000s have rolled around. And like Annie was saying, we're in it right now. So looking at all of that, it feels like life because that's the way life goes. But I bet at the end of the 2000s, at the end of this next 100 years, we're going to look back and see obviously those defining times, but also looking at the 1900s to like the 2000s, all of those, and realize just
how much has actually changed.
How much has actually changed. And I feel like we can see it now, but
yeah. Especially with the new digital age, like that was just starting in the late 90s. The computers, you have that was just beginning. And already in 2025, we have such defining digital. I mean, AI alone has completely defined the 2000s. Yeah. Completely. Even the 25 years that we've only had of this 2000s era, that is already completely like that's completely different. That is, you cannot argue that that is not a complete defining moment. Maybe there's not as prominent artists looking at it right now because they're still relevant. Eminem is defining for the 2010s or whatever it was, but he's still relevant now. We won't be able to see which exact people are going to be the most defining in what years yet because, you know, we're still listening to them.
Okay, I'm gonna hop in. I have to mute you guys. So, all right. I can tell by everything you just said. I can see this is a better way to put it. I can see the generational differences of, you know, my generation versus your generation. And because I was old enough to see the shift from the 70s to the 80s. And I'm telling you, it's like a brick in the face. We recognized it immediately. There was no, we need to wait. And the same thing with the 90s. When grunge came on the scene, we recognized it immediately. And so did every single artist of the 1980s. They're like, music has changed. And it changed overnight. And go ahead.
Okay, but that pace is different. Our concept, like, if we're going to go deep, our concept of time has changed because of the internet. So
yeah.
So you're thinking that your shifts are happening like every 2 years versus every 10 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, not 2 years. I wouldn't say that exactly. Like, I'm not going to give you every switch every 2 years.
But it kind of varies, though. You know, like with the internet, we're looking at something that doesn't have such a, like, it's not linear. It looks more like it feels to me more like a spider web where you can branch off in these different directions and everything sort of connects, and it
with the
age also of sort of mirrors our, I mean, because we're human beings and we're intelligent creatures, it kind of mirrors our own minds in a way. Like, the internet is fascinating. Like, that's a subject.
Yeah, I think that, like, the digital age and, like, social media, we have so many avenues to get everything, especially with things like TikTok. The culture even behind how quickly we move on from things has completely changed. Like, everyone's like, oh, well, that was so last week. That's so last week. Move on. Like, this is something new. There's a much faster pace of, like, almost pressure being put on the 2000s of, well, okay, well, what's new? When's the new iPhone coming out? What's changed? What's better? What's this? And it's like, there's not as, also it's like, because you have so many avenues and so many different people doing all of the same things, everyone's gaining all these same interests, and you can see everyone's personal lives and what they're doing all at once at the tip of your hands. That when, for example, in the 80s, like, the reason that those specific people were so huge to you is because that's pretty much all you had. That's all everyone listened to. That is, everyone was listening to that. You didn't have all these 500 million different people that you could get into more than them, because you have to think about how many even stars and artists and things come from TikTok. TikTok, you know how many people are? There's 1 billion people on TikTok. There is nothing that you had back in the day that you could see that many people's lives and their versions of the music and their versions. You know how many people I bet in the 80s had their own versions of stuff that they were creating that you'd never get to see. Maybe you would have liked that more, but you don't know because you didn't have the ability to have all of these new things all the time, learning constantly. You know, we have so much that's going on around us and being shoved in our face that we can't see it.
Okay, so I have to mute you guys again real quick, otherwise I echo. So I'm going to read a couple questions coming in from the audience. and these are interesting things I didn't think of. Name one new genre created since 2000.
Lo-fi. Oh.
Go ahead.
That's
You
a
guys
good
are-
one.
We'll define it. Tell me more about it.
Oh. What? Hello?
No, I'm saying define. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, no. Define lo-fi. Like, tell me about it. Tell me about what that genre is, and let's go from there.
Well, I think the beauty of lo-fi is it kind of takes in a lot of other genres, but it creates its own genre.
That's my point. It's all regurgitated. It's all a hybrid of things that have already exist. There's nothing new.
But you have to think like there's
How do you
so
create new things? Like, think about
Right.
dreams. Think about the human mind, how the human psyche actually works.
I got a great example. Allie, you completely froze up. Are you guys there? Okay, you guys froze up, so I had to mute you for a second. So you say, how do you come up with something new? You know what? Grunge didn't exist before the 90s. Disco didn't exist before the 70s. Okay,
You
go.
didn't have a
Lo-fi didn't exist. Like, these things didn't exist. You know what was so prominent about the 20s was jazz. And what was so prominent about the 80s was metal or whatever it was. What was so prominent about the 90s was grunge. What was so prominent about the 2000s, maybe hip-hop. What's 2020s? Lo-fi. Like, there are significantly prominent things that have completely not been done before. They have not been done before. Yes, they may be a variation of all these different kinds of things. You put your own twist on it, you change it up, but that's how anything is made. Grunge, how do you think grunge was made? I bet someone was messing with whatever was being played in the 80s, and they're like, oh, well, let's do it this way. Let's change it this. I want it to sound like this instead of that. And then you create grunge. And that's a new thing. And then, yeah, everyone can get into it if it becomes that trend, if it becomes popular. It's the same thing here. Hip-hop did not have to be a big thing, but it became popular. It was a switch in all these on all the different histories of music that we have to create its own. Lo-fi being all of the different variations of what we have now, pop music, hip hop, whatever it may be, mixed together into this new thing that we haven't had before.
Okay, I'm gonna meet you guys real quick. Okay, you guys are making really good points. These are the most solid points so far. But so, and you're right. You're right. That was a really good point because rock and roll evolved from like blues, So you're right. And hard rock evolved from the lighter stuff of the early days of rock and roll. So I do agree. I think my biggest argument, even though I do agree with all of that, I still think my biggest argument is even outside of music, movies is really almost a better argument for this. And again, I talked about the ones we've already talked about. A movie made in the 90s, Dazed and Confused. Or let me put it this way. Actually, let's scrap the movies. If somebody from the 50s woke up in the 80s, wild culture shock. If somebody from the 20s woke up in the 50s, wild culture shock. This is only 20, 30 years apart. If somebody from the 60s woke up in the 90s, wild culture shock. If somebody went to sleep and woke up today, they wouldn't even realize they were asleep for 23 years. That's my point. To you guys.
You're frozen for me, Thomas, just by the way. But, I mean, I don't even know, man. I don't even know. That's a hard one because I think there are things that would not necessarily as bad maybe culturally shock them if they woke up 20 years later. But I think, that goes along with what we were saying with how quickly things are evolving almost. Things are evolving so much quicker at a much faster rate in time now than they were back then, very obviously. I mean, think about how long it takes it to have these things like monumental changes, especially within, culture and in major issues as well. You have racism and you have all like sexist ideals that still to this day are struggled with, things like that. So yeah, there are big defining moments, but I mean, and maybe things look somewhat the same over here 20 years later from 2005 to 2025. But I think that for example, if I was in 2005 and hopped on 2025 and got on a computer, I'd be completely lost, like completely not. It's hard to see the physical world change as much when 2020s or 2000s are all about the digital age. That is the defining thing that has gone on for the past 25 years. So everything is all on this screen. Everything that has changed the most in our time in the 2000s so far has been right here, and that's hard to see outside of things.
Okay, I muted you guys real quick. All right, you're doing a pretty good job now, kind of turning the tide a little bit. I still am not by any means convinced, though, even though you guys have really pushed forward a lot of valid points. And this is why this is such a brilliant conversation between us, because you guys have a wildly different perspective of the 2000s, because that's all you know. And I get that. I think I want to, by the way, there's no way we're going into the other stuff today. That's going to be a whole nother conversation. So we're going to stick to this for right now. And this is going to be my last note, and I'm going to turn it over to you guys to finish it off. And my last note is going to be my last argument, and I'm just going to say it one more time. If you made a movie today about 2005, you would have to put at the beginning of the movie, if the director wanted everybody to know what year it was or what decade it was, they would have to be crystal clear, because you could not tell a difference between the early 2000s and current. If you made a movie in the 90s about the 80s, crystal clear. If you made a movie in the 80s about the 70s, crystal clear, and all the way down to 1920. And that is my final argument. And if you guys can prove me wrong here, then you win. Actually, this is all subjective, so it's not really win or lose. But I think we all have really valid points. But that's kind of the best way I can describe the way I look at it. Is if you visual standpoint, if you made a movie today based on the early 2000s, even with the music, you would have to question, is it present? Is it past? Whatever. If you made a movie in the 90s about the 80s, unquestionable. And the same thing with the 80s to the 70s and all the way down to the 20s. And that is what I will leave to you guys to close out. Go ahead.
So we're still talking in a very linear fashion. That's sort of a big thing that's changed, is that linearity that, and we may not be able to see the totality of that until a couple years have passed by, but we can still recognize like the sprouts of it right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that even like what you were saying is if you made a movie now in 2025 about 2005, I still think there are a lot of things that would, show you that. Like the entire vibe of the movie, if you're doing it correctly as a good director or whatever it is, there are going to be completely different things that you see in that movie than you would now. Without them telling me, oh, this is year 2005, and I just watched it with no context, but it was supposed to be based in 2005, I'd say that I could tell. I could probably tell. You have just everything looks different. The phones are going to be completely different. The computers are going to be completely different. These are things that you will see in the movie. If you're doing it correct, you're going to use songs that were only, huge and popular in that year. So you're going to get the same vibe that you got if you were, alive during those years listening to those trendy things. You're going to be able to recognize that if you were in it. Like, if, for example, you in the 1990s watching a movie about the 80s, it takes you back. That's a memory thing. And there is obviously going to be a vibe that, say you watch a movie based on the 20s, like, but there's a vibe on 20s music, things that were popular and things that we know were popular back then. They wear the flapper dresses. They have every little thing that was different in that year is presented. So every little thing that's different in 2005 versus 2025, which there are a lot of huge differences, will be present if you can look back on the movie. Like, just the way anything will look, if you really want to, make it look 2000, even change the quality of the film, because the quality of the digital age back then was awful, and that is one of the main things about it. I mean, there's a whole lot that you could go into about the differences of the years and things, and it is really just to say, though, that things have been moving at a much different rate, and our access to all this information and all these different, popular things make it hard for specific prominent things to be so prominent. There's so much going on. So we get this overload of information, overload of things being presented to us that, that alone is the difference. And that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
I think we could be able to tell or see.
Yeah.
Okay, so I lied. I'm going to jump back in just for a second. No, I think I said everything. I was just going to tell you guys. I think the channel's audience is probably closer to my age, so it's a little bit weighted. But I will tell you, there's a lot of support for my arguments. But at the same time, I legitimately hear what you're saying, and I agree with a lot of it. I was looking really on the pop culture specifically, the defining performers that made that decade, like I mentioned earlier. And we've kind of shifted to now that the 2000s are more of a digital age that are wildly oversaturated with some standouts, but I still see how that can be different. Anyway, go ahead, Allie.
But we have to look at that differently because the structure of pop of how things arise in popular culture, the structure of that has changed. So we have to even look at it through different lens now if we're going to start looking at 2000s onward.
Yeah. I mean, it's a complete different way of
it's receiving like another
this
pair of glasses.
New stuff. Yeah, like, you like kind of back what I was saying before, like back in the 80s, things were so much more condensed. you pretty much had what you got. And yeah, it was popular because that's all you had. That's what it was. That is the main thing. You only had a few artists to choose from, and I'd even say someone, obviously they're going to be biased a bit towards their own generation, thinking that, well, this is the best one. I grew up in this completely changed everything for me. And well, someone else from that generation who, may not have been into the same things as you, thought other things defined those years. And it's just all very subjective, and especially now with the new, age of pop culture, that being the biggest change in the 2000s is how we were able to get that. We have so many different ways and avenues to see different things and all these different variations that everyone has their own opinion, and it's become the new culture to everyone be different. Well, don't be the same. I like them. Do you like that's different? It's more normal to not have one huge thing that defines it. It's too fast moving. There's too much going on now with technology that we can't have these major defining moments because there's too much going on.
Annie, do you have ChatGPT pulled up? Okay. Type in this and tell me what it says. Type in, based on the years 1920 to 2025, do you, as AI, believe that pop culture has stalled out in the last 20 years? And let's see what AI has to say about it. And I want you to just read what it says and tell them to make it, a relatively short answer, because it'll spit out 10 pages for you. And tell me what it says.
Okay. As AI, and I said, so based on, this is what I typed in, based on the years 1920 to 2025, do you as AI believe that pop culture has stalled out? Give me a quick answer. The answer is no. Pop culture has not stalled out. It is constantly evolving with new trends, genres, and technologies shaping this. While some may feel cyclical or nostalgic, innovation in media, fashion, and tech keeps driving change and pushing the boundaries of society.
Okay, so copy and paste your exact question and plug it back in, and don't hit enter yet. I'm going to have you alter a couple things. So read it to me one more time, and I'm going to tell you to add like 2 or 3 words.
Based on the years 1920 to 2025 as AI, do you believe that pop culture has stalled out?
Okay. So what I want you to add is based on the years. Hang on, based on the years 1920 to 2025. Type this in. Say each decade appears to be wildly different than the next. Based on that, do you think we've had a pop culture stall out in the last 20 years? And see what it says. And I turn it over to you.
Okay. Let's see. My question was, based on the years 19 to 2025, each decade appears to be wildly different than the next. Based on that, do you believe, or do you as AI believe that pop culture has stalled out in the past 20 years? Quick answer. Well, there are certainly a cyclical element in pop culture over the past 20 years, I wouldn't say it has stalled out. However, the pace of innovation might feel slower due to the saturation of digital media and nostalgic-driven trends. New platforms and technologies like streaming and AI continue to push the pop culture forward, through the shifts may not feel as drastic as previous decades.
Okay, that's a good answer. So it's kind of like, yeah, kind of not. So I think we got nowhere today. But in all honesty, I hope you guys can see kind of where I'm coming from, because I definitely see where you're coming from, and I actually agree with a lot of what you said. You guys changed my opinion a lot more than I think originally was going to happen. So you guys did a real good job on that. So we're way past time on how long I wanted this. In all honesty, we barely even, we only made it halfway through this conversation. We have a whole nother piece we were going to talk about, but in all honesty, that other piece can easily be its own podcast. So we'll do that another time. But I think I'm ready to close it out. Do you guys have any closing notes? Are you good? Any last things you want to say to something you thought of last second or anything? Or go ahead.
Well, I don't have anything really necessarily as far as this conversation goes. I think AI has a lot to say because it has all the information given to the world, basically. But I just kind of want to know how many viewers we got. What's the crowd saying? If there's any specific comments that have jumped out to you, maybe.
Yeah, let me go over to the comments real quick. So we've had about 259 people join at any given time. The concurrent viewers, the ones that stay on longer, is definitely lower, but we've had about 260 people join while we've been talking. So it's really heavily weighted towards me. And that again, it could be a generational thing. It's not a knock against you guys. I really think that's kind of a generational thing. A lot of people are saying that, and you guys kind of combated this pretty well, in the sense of a lot of people are saying like anything new is really just kind of a mashup of previous genres. There really hasn't been a defined new genre. It's kind of like a hybrid.
I think still the genres that exist have been pushed forward quite a bit. Like I feel like the genres that we do have been, and you could say that this is recycling, but I don't think it's quite that. I think it's a little bit more like individuals redefining by their own artistry, whatever. Yeah. So
it's everything's so much more individualistic now. Like it's the new culture to be, a different variation, a slight different variation. I like this, but different.
So it might sort of be an argument that there is a lot of creativity, because it's not just massively this person or that person. It's a lot of different people with a lot of different takes. And honestly, I feel like some of the genres that are new and that would be defining, they may not be popular culture, because popular culture, the structure has changed. But there is definitely, if you're like on Spotify and you like music that isn't very popular and you get into different artists and stuff, oh my goodness, like there are probably a ton more genres now than there ever has been. But how do you make those things?
It's harder.
They're not going to become popular. Culture exists, but culture is becoming more niche, and people are becoming more niche because they can, and it's kind of cool.
Okay, that's a really good point. And Annie, between the two of you, that summed up really nicely. because Allie, what you're saying is there's a massive oversaturation of people putting music out, and they're doing their own thing.
Yeah. And, people getting a lot of popularity through their music, through like TikTok and things like that by going viral, that's a huge thing now. And people are coming up with their own creations where I could say, I don't even know what genre that would be, but it's beautiful and it's something very original. And here's what I kind of see. I see that there is the route of like AI and the regurgitation and stuff, but that's just one thing. Human ingenuity is something that is definitely still there. And I mean, I feel like we are a really creative generation. It's just not, there's just not one big kahuna at the top anymore. It's a lot of different people. And it's actually pretty cool because now creative people can probably thrive more than ever. There's more opportunity.
Okay, and that goes back to the other point. Between the two of you, you really sum that up nicely. Allie with the idea that it's just oversaturated and there's such an easy means for anybody that's creative. I mean, look at us. I mean, I'm just a regular dude and I'm sitting here yapping about this stuff. I mean, what do I know? But the point is I have the platform built in to do this, and so does everybody else. And that's Allie's point. And Annie's point, to really bring this home between the two, because both your points together make an amazing point. And the oversaturation is one side of it, and Annie's statement of the idea that we were limited. We were right. I mean, that's right. You had to actually go out and make it. You had to go out and be recognized and then be put out into public. Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I said by specific people. Now it's
anyone and everyone.
Yeah. Or whoever is, enjoys what you put out there, which, yeah, there's a lot of variation.
Like, Thomas, I bet this thing that we're doing here is going to be really significant for you in your life personally. This could, change everything. And even the viewers who especially agree with your side or something this could spark something completely different in them. And it's such an easier avenue to have all these different things and like see everyone's individual lives are being like on show now. Anyone can post anything anywhere to go to anyone. We've never had that before. We've never had so many, different people to see and take off what they're doing and do our own thing. And, you didn't have as much of that back then. And it was harder for so many different, things that could have been huge to be seen. Those few significant things in the 80s were probably, they were seen because they happened to make it. There's just a few select people that happened to make it. There was probably a bunch of billions of people in the background having different genres than that were also different to the ones before them that could have also been completely significant, but we're just not able to be seen. And we just are able to see that now.
Okay, so yeah, probably a lot of missed opportunity for talent before all the accessibility that we have today. That's out of everything that's gone on today. Well, first of all, this is very subjective. There's really no right or wrong here. It's very subjective, and it's how you look at it. And you can see clearly the differences between the generations. And you guys look at it wildly different because you guys were born into technology. I was born into playing outside. Everything was analog. I didn't get my first cell phone until I was 25, just to put that into perspective. And I didn't get my first home computer until I was in my 20s either. It just wasn't nearly as common back then. So yeah, I appreciate the point of view you guys brought. You actually shifted my viewpoint on this a lot. Now, I'm not 100% sold in the idea that I still feel like it's not nearly as defined as previous decades, but I see your point a whole lot more than I did when we first started this podcast.
Awesome. That's what we're here to do. Shift, you know, both from your side and ours. I definitely had my perspectives widened and changed a bit as well. So,
Well, cool. Anybody got any last words? No? Yes? No? Good? Okay. Well, let's get out of here. Again, we barely even, there's a whole nother part of this that we were going to try to get into, but we just went down this long road of trying to define what's generationally defining. Anyway, this is a lot of fun though, man. I really had a lot of fun going back and forth with you guys. You guys gave me way more pushback than I would have thought when we first started this. And I appreciate that. That's what really makes this kind of interesting to listen to, because if we were in full agreement, it'd just be us talking about something. So I think the going back and forth was really what drove this to be interesting. So if anybody doesn't have anything else to say, we'll put another one of these together when we can, and you guys will see us soon, hopefully. And anybody got any last words before we part?
farewell. Until next time.
All right, guys. We are out of here. I'm going to edit this down. Oh, wait, I'm echoing. Okay. So we're out of here. I'm going to edit this down, and I'll get a clean version on the channel. And look for us again. We'll make another announcement. And we've got some really intriguing subjects that we're thinking about doing. Things that are even outside of pop culture, more on the science side, the conspiracy theory side. So we're going to be doing a lot of those in the near future. So stay tuned. Peace out. All right, guys. We're out.